Mm-hmm.
Guess who sent me their GedMatch information?
Oh, here we go.
Out of nowhere, I wake up and whatnot, and I look at my Facebook, and Abu has decided to send me his GedMatch info. I'm like, hey, let's take a look at this and talk about it.
Yeah, I was looking at it last Saturday, not yesterday, but yeah, the week before. I'm looking at it Saturday. I was like, oh man, this is interesting.
So hold on real quick. I actually put the photos into a little presentation slide situation right quick. Let me get to it. There we go. So, yeah, I'm assuming you recently got your results in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah. So here we go. Shout out to GedMatch. So this was your African 9 and Dode cat, I believe. And this is just to map everybody. And so you can check that out. Being that we're late, I won't run through everything right here, but y'all can see that right there. And this is his numbers in Dode cat. Now, do you want to break that down at all, or what did you find interesting about these numbers? First of all,
well, I mean, it's I was more interested in the Oracle results because I think there's a discussion to be had about what's in Oracle, because I do think that that there needs to be a slowdown in terms of what's found in Oracle, right? So this is the way I would put it with Oracle. Like, the best way to think of the Oracle results is in terms of modal logic, right? The Oracle results are not necessarily saying, right, that what's coming up there is necessarily the case. It's talking about possibilities. And so that distance figure should be thought of as like referencing probability, right? So if I can explain modal logic, right? If I'm not mistaken, you were born in the United States, right? You were born in the West Coast?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in terms of modal logic, the statement Orthodox Moor was born in Canada is false, right? But the statement it's possible that Orthodox Moor was born in Canada is true, right? Even though you weren't actually born there, the statement that it's possible you were is true. So with that in mind, that's sort of what's happening here. It's not discussing, it's trying to, with the Oracle results, you have the 1 population, the 2 population, the 3 population, and the 4. It's trying to imagine what your DNA would be similar to if you descended from just 1 population, or if you descended from 2 populations, or 3 or 4. And that distance figure sort of is like a probability figure. So the higher your distance, the more improbable your likelihood of descending from that sort of group, right? And there are texts like GedMatch has a wiki on it that talks about it, that even if something comes up in specifically your Oracle results, that doesn't mean your parents actually descend from that group. And there's another place that I found, another website that was saying it doesn't even entail that you share significant DNA with these groups, right? It's more discussing probabilities. And I think we'll get into that when we get to the Japanese thing. So, for example, like you see Yemen Jews I got way down at the bottom, and it's like 63. I would describe that as astronomically high, Like, by the way, and I told you this privately, if I don't remember what it was, but Yehukanan, when he showed his results, there were things that were coming up with a distance less than 1. It'd be like 0 point something, and I think that's significant. But
yeah, Yehukanan is literally the only person I've seen with something that low on something.
But that's significant. I think the reason, what I'm trying to say is, like, for me to get like Yemen Jews, but distance of 63, I think you should take that with a grain of salt, and or a fistful of salt. But I think just as that applies to me, it also applies to others who have said things like, look, I got, I don't want to say any names, but I saw one gentleman who back in October showed his results, and he was like, look, I got Ethiopian Jew, but it's like, it's like 64. The distance is 64. Could we show some of the other ones of the Oracle results?
You got it. So hold on.
The ones that show like
So this is the Ethio Helix K10 map. And then I'll jump to Oracle right quick. So I didn't know which was which. I'm assuming the one on the left is K10 Palestine.
Yeah, let me see. Hold on, it hasn't come up on my end yet. I'm sorry. I can see it on my phone, but I'm waiting for the 18 seconds where it switches on the laptop on the YouTube. Okay. I can barely read that, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Okay. Hold on.
It's switching now. Oh, wait, I need another second. And
let me do this and make it a little bit bigger.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I got it now. Yeah, so this is interesting. So because a lot of people would get excited about finding Ethiopian Jew in their in their Oracle results. Again, Oracle is not necessarily showing you, it's talking about possibilities. So it doesn't, if you get something in your Oracle results, it doesn't mean you actually descend from that population or share DNA. Now, I'm not ruling that out either. You could share DNA with them, but it's not guaranteed. So I got Ethiopian Jews at distances that were very, very high, and yet still lower than the distance that a gentleman who was showing something last October, who I have in mind. And so, I would consider, like, when you're seeing this kind of thing where you have like Ethiopian Jew and it's like very, very high, it's in the 40s, the 50s, or even in the case of other people, the 60s, slow down and don't say, well, this proves that I'm, that I'm an Ethiopian Jew or something like that. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense. Like, these sort of distances are very high. Yehukanan's distances were very interesting. Something that's under 1 is fascinating, but something that's way up there is, it's
and that was like in connection with the Lemba. So that's why, like, Yehukanan, like dealing with the Yehukanan and talking to Cohen Hamadisha, because Cohen Hamadisha, like, he told me flat, he was like, no, there were Lemba on slave ships. I was like, oh, what? I was like, my jaw hit the floor. I was like, I had never even contemplated that. So when he told me that, that's when I looked into the East African slave trade. And when I saw the Yehukanan's DNA, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on? Okay. Like, so because I had to pause and look at this real quick. So real quick, just so I understand, what's your understanding of the numbers?
Well, what I would say is that when you see these numbers that are, anything that's like, first off, I would even be skeptical about stuff that's like, in the single digits, but anything 10 and up, and the higher it goes, the skepticism should go up as well, because what it's saying is it's becoming more improbable. So certainly Ethiopian Jew, like you see, I'm hitting 46 on one calculator, 52 on another, 55 on another. I would consider those numbers astronomically high and therefore very improbable. And I think the same applies for people who are getting Ethiopian Jewish results in the 60s and stuff like that. Do you have the one, and we can go back and forth, do you have the one that has Japanese on it, the Oracle results? It's like 2 populations, because this is relevant.
I don't know if, hold on, I got to double check, see if you sent me that one.
Yeah, I did send it. I think I sent it. Yeah, but if not, no worries.
The one I remember is the K10.
Yeah.
Well, what was your Japanese?
What I showed the Oracle results for, and the Japanese thing is interesting for me, right? So, like, my actual lineage, right? Because there's people out there guessing. They're like, oh, he's a fan of Assad, therefore he's Syrian or something like that. And I'm a big fan of Assad, but there's people all over the world that love Assad. But my actual breakdown of lineage, right? The way it works is my father's line comes out of Morocco, but they cut through the Philippines.
Oh, the 2 population picture. That's the one you want. Okay.
Yes, the 2 population picture. Exactly.
Give me a second, and I'll
so while you're setting that up, my actual lineage is relevant to this, right? So my mother's population, as far as I know, it's, both her parents were from Western Europe, right? So my mother's population is European. My father's family comes out of Morocco, but they cut through the Philippines. And so I have Filipino heritage, right? And so as a result, on all these calculators, I'm hitting these East Asian markers, right? And what's interesting is some of the calculators were able to correctly guess Filipino. One of them, I forget which one it was. It might have been one of these DNA L things. It even guessed the region. It had like Ilocano, which was the Ilocos region, was where my father's father, because his mother was Ilocano, he spoke Ilocano. Like I never met him, but the story I heard is that he used to say that because he could speak Arabic, Spanish, English, and Tagalog and Ilocano, but Ilocano was the language that he dreamt in, So that's why he would say that Ilocano is his mother language, because that's the language, that his mother spoke to him. So when he would dream, when he would think, he thought in Ilocano. He dreamed in Ilocano, But anyway, so because I have that Filipino heritage, on some of these calculators, some of them are saying Filipino, but others, in terms of Oracle results, strictly Oracle results, I'm getting, I'm setting off their East Asian markers, but they're giving me stuff like Thai, Cambodian, Vietnamese, and Japanese. And that's why if you have that two population thing, it's also relevant to the probability, and it helps us, excuse me, explain some of this stuff with the probability.
So it's Ethiopia Helix K10 Japanese.
Well, whatever. I think I only sent you one thing with two populations. It should say two, but let me see. I should go into my own.
Yeah, I'm just making sure. I'm titling the whole thing. So if it's the wrong title, it's my fault.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm gonna open up the my thread with you.
It would only make sense to me that it's the K10 Japanese. That's all. So.
Yeah. Although I don't know if it'll say K10. I think it'll just say
not in the two population. But okay.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah. I think that's it right there. Yep. Yes. That's it. Okay. So this is relevant. You see it hitting, like, I get a bunch of these things. So again, obviously I don't know the exact amount of Filipino heritage I have, but it's somewhere hovering around between 10 and 20%, right? 15% according to, forgive me, 23andMe. So because I have that East Asian heritage, on some of these calculators, I'm hitting Japanese in Oracle results, and others I'm hitting Thai, Cambodian, Vietnamese. But I'm not any of those things. I'm definitely not 15% Japanese or 20% Japanese. But if you look at the distances, right, you have the situation where I'm getting, like, for 15% Japanese, it's my distance number is in the sevens, right? It's 7. Yet I don't actually have Japanese heritage. I think the point to be made there is, even if you get something around that low, like 7 or 10, like I'm seeing people say, look, I got Lemba and their distance is 10. Just as, excuse me, forgive me. Just as me getting a 7 or a 5 for Japanese doesn't mean I actually have significant Japanese DNA or descend from somebody that's Japanese. Someone who's getting Lemba in their Oracle results and at a distance of 10, it does not mean that it could be, they still could have Lemba heritage, but it does not mean that they descend from a Lemba or share significant DNA with them. You know, that's the point to be taken, that the probabilities are significant. And so from my own example, I know for a fact that I'm not 15% Japanese. So a number like 7 should be considered, even that should be considered a high distance, a high level of improbability. It's better than, what I'm getting for Ethiopian Jew, which is in the 40s and the 50s, but still. So I think there needs to be, when a lot of people out there, or some people out there, I'm only looking at a few people, but some people were quite excited simply by seeing Ethiopian Jew, Moroccan Jew, Lemba. And I didn't get Lemba, but I got Moroccan Jew and Ethiopian Jew and all that in mine as well. But there needs to be a serious conversation about the distances and what they say about probabilities and improbabilities. That was the main point that I was trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't really deal with the two population stuff too much, because when they deal with the two population, they're kind of guessing to see what you kind of mix and match to see what your stuff looks like. So I'm mixed as well, right? Like, so being West African, North African, Southern Mediterranean, Native American, all that, like, I'll come with Puerto Rican, Dominican, all kind of stuff, because like that's like when you go to the Puerto Rican, Dominican, like that's what the blend is, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same point in time, like, so like I'm like 13 to 20% Native American. Like, so when I put my DNA in the Ethiopia Helix K10 Japanese, that reflected in the Japanese part, you know what I'm saying? So I see what you're saying on that. However, I look at GedMatch probably more than anybody I've talked to in the community, and I get to look at everybody's GedMatch. So like everyone says their stuff. I've looked at Hukanons, Anonymouses, G-Cons, Kevin G's, everybody, you know what I'm saying? And compared and contrasted and gone through all the different projects and gone through all the different emails with GedMatch to see what they're talking about, etc. And gone through all the different projects and the spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff to see who's in what project, or what people in what countries in what project, etc. Whatnot. And it's interesting. I'll say it's very interesting. And one thing that I've recognized is that if you look at it long enough and you know what you're looking at, you can tell a lot from GedMatch. It's not 100% exact. However, when you're talking about distances, I think different calculators work differently with the distance.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, for instance, like I'm going to show real quick. Hold on. There we go. This is the one you were referring to, right? This is Pastor Kelly's MDLP project.
Yeah, he showed that a few times. That particular one is, I think, when he appeared on Dante in October.
Yes, I believe so. And so his distance from with the Ethiopian Jew was 64,
which is higher than what I got for any of my hits for Ethiopian Jew.
Right,
and that's not to say that my counts are good. Mine are also extremely high. 40 and 50 is high. As I would say.
Yeah. Yes and no. So for instance, if somebody typically, if they're hitting like a 64 in like the Ethiopian Jew in the MDLP, in their single distances, they won't come up at all as Ethiopian Jew and Ethio Helix. It's very most people, I'll just say like that. Most people who hit that distance in MDLP don't come up at all as Ethiopian Jew in Ethio Helix. As a matter of fact, a lot of so G-Con hits pretty high on Ethiopian Jew and MDLP, but he doesn't come up Ethiopian Jew at all in Ethio Helix in any of them. Not on the single digit populations or whatnot. Anonymous doesn't come up Ethiopian Jew. I don't believe Hukanot comes up Ethiopian Jew in Ethio Helix. Ethio Helix is very, very particular. Because
I got it all across Ethio Helix. Yeah, that's surprising that some people didn't. Because it's funny. You're sort of you're shutting down a silent assumption I had. The question that I had, I was thinking, show me a person whose family cut through Africa, any part of Africa, who doesn't get Ethiopian Jew somewhere in their oracle results. But you're telling me of people without me even asking the question. Because that was honestly my assumption, that the only reason I'm getting it is because anyone who has recent family coming from Africa, even North Africa, the northern part of North Africa, right? Like my family that came out of Morocco was in the north,
Well, yeah, and so what's interesting about that is, so your genetics looks very. Do you mind if I show your genetics in comparison to my mom's and mine?
Yes, of course. Yes, please do.
Okay, because your breakdown was almost identical to my mother's, in terms of the number and whatnot. And so hold on, I'm gonna run through these real quick because I did it twice and I got me in here too. So this is me. This is my Dodecad, African 9 in Africa in the World 9. So the right is the World 9 and the left is the African 9. So you see my top on the World 9. I get Dominican, Puerto Rican, Somali, MKK 30 is Kenya. Ethiopian Jews at 6. Here's my 6th place. I get a 40. This is a 42. All types of things. And in my African 9, I got Moroccan Jew and North African Jew at a distance of 44 and 46.
So lower than mine, yeah, in terms of the Ethiopian, right? Wait, I'm sorry. Do you have Ethiopian Jew in there?
Not in the African 9, no.
Okay, sorry.
However, okay, this is you versus my mom. So your
tough-skinned Moroccan Jews. Oh man.
So now you only gave me 15. This hers has the 20 on here or whatnot.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I have to go back in. Yeah, I was grabbing these screenshots fast because I was.
Okay. Because we're gonna do this then. So I'm gonna put it. So I look at GedMatch quite a bit, and so I'm gonna make a bet, right? Gentleman's bet that you have Ethiopian Jew in your next 5 that says anywhere from the high 67s to the low 70s. But so I'm saying that to say this, so my mother's father has E1B1B as his haplogroup as well. He's EM34 whatnot, and so there's 2 big pockets of that. There's a pocket of that that's in the Levant. And there's a pocket in Ethiopia, Kenya type area. You know what I'm saying? And so,
fascinating. That makes it more plausible.
Right, but yeah, your numbers are almost exact. So Moroccan Jew, you're 17. My mom's sitting 16. North African Jew, you're 24. My mom's sitting basically 24. You go down to the Druze, Jordanians, Egypt, all that type of stuff. It's real simple, real super simple. And so, what's interesting though is in looking at my mom's genetics, looking at my uncle's genetics, whatnot. So they have Middle Eastern genetics. They also have my uncle actually has some South African and some East African trace genetics, etc., whatnot. So it's very possible that their migration is actually came from like Yemen, Ethiopia, etc., and came through to North Africa and just mixed for a lot of years or whatnot. And so there's a large people don't recognize how large that population is. Like, so for instance, and even doing the history, like you can read about Ibn Khaldun, who writes about this in terms of like the Berber populations and whatnot in North and West Africa, and like the Jewish people who were amongst them, etc. And he says they come from two places. That the Jews came from the Levant and Syria, and they also came from Ethiopia, Yemen, and whatnot, right? And so, and the interesting about that is Ibn Khaldun also says like that his people came from Yemen, and so he's writing that in North Africa, you know what I'm saying? So, so there's a lot of there's a large portion or there's a portion of Jews, for instance, in North Africa that share genetics, this EM34 with people in the Levant and in Ethiopia, whatnot. So it's possible. It's very possible that people in North Africa are a blend of people that came from the Levant and from Ethiopia, Yemen, and whatnot, and they share those genetics and whatnot. So you're talking about this route that like anyone who came through this route may have a Ethiopian genetics. Yay, nay, maybe it's possible.
Well, no, you basically told me that you can think of people who don't. Like I was thinking anyone who had recent African ancestry is going to get it, but like it's funny because I was thinking that silently. I didn't share that with you, and you answered the question before I asked it. Like I was actually confident that I like the way I imagined in my head. I was confident that I could say to you, "Can you name anyone who has like some sort of family ties to Africa who didn't get Ethiopian, Jew in their oracle results?" And I was confident you're gonna be like, "No, I can't think of anyone." But
before I can literally only name one other person who's told me in the community. I believe Yakoba has said that they come up Ethiopian Jewish in the Ethio Helix. But beyond that, me and them are the only ones that I know of.
Interesting.
And so I say that to say this. You may actually be Ethiopian Jewish, my G. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. The distances are still pretty high, though.
No. Here's what I'm saying. Like, so you're talking about like from your father's side. There's the Moroccan side, right? So it's very like so. In your head, do you think it's possible that you're Moroccan Jewish in any way, shape, or form, or that you have any Jewish lineage from your Moroccan side?
I mean, it's possible. The problem is that what I've been told, like the Moroccan side of the family, what they did is they cut into the Philippines, and like my father never, met the people who came from Morocco into the Philippines, but I met an old man from Lawag who said that he knew my great grandfather who came from Morocco to the Philippines. He told me that again, my father didn't even know the story, so take this with a grain of salt. But this old man from Lawag said that he knew who my great grandfather was, that he comes from Morocco, that he was a Muslim who at least nominally took on a Catholic persona when he was in Ilocos Norte, and even
that's right.
So the thing is, I don't know. I mean, that's all I could tell you. For all I know is that the family became Catholic, but the people who came over from Morocco were Muslims apparently. Now, does that rule out the possibility that they were Jews? No, but the honest answer is I don't know anything about them.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at this and I can tell that you're at least half North African, Mediterranean. You know what I'm saying? Like strong, like because I know, like, so for instance, like I know what my mother's genetics look like in terms of her DNA test, right? Like, so I can look this and see, like, okay, y'all are pretty close. You know what I'm saying? I know, like, so for instance, like when I put when I took a family tree, right? They kicked all my Spanish DNA into North Africa. They made me 24% North African, whatnot, right? So, that in turn making my mom like 48%, right? You know what I'm saying? Like yeah. But here's what I'm saying. Like, so in that vein, if it's possible that you're Jewish and whatnot, the Jewish would have come into the Morocco or into North Africa from either the Levant or from Ethiopia, Yemen, and whatnot, and or both or whatnot. So I'll just say it like this: when looking at my family history and looking at the genetics thereof in what seems to be the migration pattern, because it seems that they had a east to west migration pattern that touched East Africa or like Southern Arabia, etc. whatnot. Particularly, I can see this with my grandfather's genetics and whatnot. it seems like that they would have also had a migration pattern that's very similar from going from Yemen to North Africa. Maybe not necessarily to like Mali or West Africa, because they didn't have to. Because like I said, there's multiple breakoff routes in the Sahel or whatnot. But it definitely seems that and when I look at their genetics, because even with the my DNA test and family tree, where mom and uncle got like the Middle East or whatnot. Like, so again, like, so for them, that they were getting the Spanish stuff that I didn't get, right? To where it kicked their Spanish into North Africa for me, and they kicked their Middle Eastern stuff into East Africa for me. Like, so I ended up getting like 2% like Somali or whatnot, or Somali. It was a Somali, Eritrea, Ethiopia, or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, okay. Like, I'm sitting there looking at the fact, like, wow. I'm doing the math on my genetics. I'm looking. I'm like, whoa, and man, God is my witness. I'm sitting here for months, trying to figure something out. I had a question. I was like, wait a minute, am I getting East African stuff from my mom and not my dad? Is that what's going on? Right? Yeah. Interesting. And I actually so this is what I and so I and playing with my DNA. I'll show you what I came up with. Well, first of all, I forgot how I got this. What do I got next? So this is my mom's Ethiopia. I think this is my mom's. No, this is yours. Because you're 73% from. Yeah, this is yours.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, it's throwing the European and the Asian together, I think.
Yep. And so this is your 3. And again, I noticed she didn't do like the Africa only.
Right.
Because you only did 3 of them. Because there's 4 to do. So your 3, you average out at 51.65 on the Ethiopian and whatnot, right? And
yeah. So, which again, I would think is high. That's my concern. I think that's very high.
Right. So yeah, this one's my mom, right? So she's 66 on the French. She's 25 North African. Oh, this is what I want to point out on you that I thought was interesting. Back on my joint. So you are 5% Omatic.
Yeah. Oh man.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. Yeah.
Right. So I want to show something. Right. So you're 5% Omatic, right? So my mother is 3% Omatic, right?
Yeah, a lot of similarities there. That is interesting.
Right. I'm 5% Omatic on mine when you see mine. But this is my mom, right? Like, so my mom pulls up Ethiopian Jewish on this, right? So again, a lot of people who gave me their GedMatch don't pull up Ethiopian Jewish in this. My mom's pulling up Ethiopian Jewish in this. And again, Ethiopian Jewish is the only one you can pull up in the Ethiopian helix. Now, again, I'm gonna say this, like, so if you, I've seen people who were Jewish not pull up Ethiopian Jewish in this, like people who were Jewish in other single populations who did not pull up Jewish in this. So I'm talking like European Jews and whatnot. So,
can I also
go ahead?
Another thing though is that because when I was trying to read up on Oracle, right? Another thing to keep in mind is apparently some of these calculators aren't necessarily going by shared DNA, although that remains a possibility. It's also sort of looking at how your mix, what sort of proximity your mix has to their samples, the samples that the particular calculator is using. And so it's also possible, like for the reason that I'm getting Tuscan, right? Is because so I have this European ancestry and this North African ancestry, and then naturally there's a bunch of samples from Italy that are going to similarly have European and North African mixes. So like exactly. I can get Tuscan without actually being Tuscan, and that may also explain Moroccan Jew because I may not necessarily descend from any Moroccan Jews. It could just be like for example, the Moroccan Jewish population did absorb European Jewish populations to some degree.
Yes, they did. So I will say this though: a lot of people who were used to looking at the GedMatch are going to look at your Moroccan Jewish numbers like, oh, word, those are low as hell. For real, because a lot of people, so a lot of people in the community they're looking at their second, their two population distances and whatnot, and picking up Jewish lineage and whatnot. Some people aren't. Some people are doing it in single person populations and whatnot. But a lot of people are looking in the 2-person populations and whatnot, 2 population distances and whatnot. So they're seeing yours and they're like, oh, word. They're seeing all kind of stuff in the single population. And so, and the same thing happened with my mom's and whatnot. And so, we put our DNA in a whole bunch of different third party stuff, like the DNA land. We put our stuff in the My Tree Ancestry, all the kind of stuff. And And again, consistently, my mom and my uncle were getting all kind of different North African Jewishes and going down into Yemen, all that kind of stuff, right? And so it seems that it's plausible that there's this link to that again, that east to west migration from Yemen as well. That there's some genetic flow with that, and so with that, this is what I'm saying. What I know about Ethiohelix is touchy when it comes to Ethiopian Jew. It's super touchy. Like not everyone gets it. You know what I'm saying? Like so, I can put in Africans from all over Africa, and I've done so. And I'm going to do videos where I do that. Where I got people from the Congo. I got Fulani from Nigeria. I got some Somali female, all the type of stuff, and different people come up with completely different stuff.
Interesting, and most of them are not getting Ethiopian Jew because I did get Ethiopian
yeah,
Jew
you're right. Most of them are not. Like so, for instance, like there's a Fulani person who has my exact haplogroup. He's E1A. He's in Nigeria. He does not pull up Ethiopian Jew at all.
That's interesting. I got to repeat that you're shutting down an assumption that I had coming in.
Right.
Like I was really confident that you weren't going to be able to name anybody. Like that was my assumption.
Yeah.
Like man, anybody whose family came out of Africa recently is going to get that. You know, but no, apparently not.
That's not the case.
All right,
so yeah, man, you might have to do a couple of extra DNA tests, man. Because so if you took 23andMe is horrible when it comes to Jewish DNA. I don't know what test you took, or whatever. But,
yeah, nothing came up. Nothing came up in 23andMe.
I think because 23andMe only tests for Ashkenazi and whatnot. Like so, if you go with like Family Tree or with MyHeritage, they actually test for multiple different types of Jewish or whatnot. And so they'll throw 23andMe will throw anything that's not Ashkenazi Jewish into something else.
Okay, yeah, because that's I was gonna bring that up. Like I get nothing Jewish, on 23andMe. So
yep,
nothing Sephardic or Moroccan or Ethiopian, none of that stuff.
Oh, I gotta. Okay, so if you're willing, what is your paternal haplogroup?
R. That's also why, yeah. And I do not. I know you said you can make a case for R. I do not believe that R is. I'm a lot less confident than you are that R would be Jacob's haplogroup.
Oh, I'm not saying I'm confident. I'm just saying I can make a case for it.
I think it would be weaker than J or E1B1B.
I agree. I think it's the weakest out of the three.
Yes, I agree. Exactly. Like, let's put it this way: if you and maybe Dante will like this. If you put Dante's haplogroup and my haplogroup up, and you said we got to bet on one, I'm gonna go with Dante's rather than mine in terms of haplogroup, paternal haplogroup. I'm not betting on R.
So RM269 or something else.
It was a European R. It was a 311 or something like that.
Okay, no worries.
Which then seems to imply that my Moroccan lineage, at some point there was somebody in Europe that cut in,
Yeah, I mean, I mean that's Morocco, fam. I mean, like there was a lot of between Morocco and Spain. I mean,
yeah, it's a short boat ride. My father's done that boat ride. He's literally ridden the boat from southern Spain to Morocco. Yeah, and it's pretty quick.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you got R. What's your maternal haplogroup?
Say it again.
What did you see what your maternal haplogroup was?
I forget it, but this one was fascinating for me because to try and like paint what my mother looked like, she was a ginger, very light skin, red hair. Both her parents from Ireland, is my understanding. We got U, but it was a type of U that's typical of Gujarat, of Western India.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was discussing that with my wife, and I was saying, like I never would have guessed that, but like that sort of like minuscule amount of Indian does come up in and the thing was, it's I guess what it tells us is that like you could have had some girl in Western India, let's say 500 years ago, and somebody marries her or snatches her up, who knows, brings her a little bit north into Afghanistan. She has a daughter. That daughter winds up in Tajikistan, and like her chain of daughters just keep going west, and somehow at some point they wind up in Ireland, with red hair.
So mom was a ginger gypsy. I got you. That's what's up.
Yeah.
So okay. Yeah. So this is my mom's stuff in the Ethiohelix in all four or whatnot. So because she did the all four, the number's a little bit different for you because you got three. But again, like so, so we're looking at the very legitimate possibility that she does have Ethiopian. Like so, in her mind, she does connect to the Ethiopian Jews. So we looked at the genetics and whatnot. We looked at hers and mine. She's like, okay, yeah. Because I had to stop her. I was like, so this is what it came down to. So her and my uncle were pulling up 3.5% Middle Eastern DNA and whatnot. And it was just like the whole, like it was just pulling up the whole Middle East and whatnot. I was like, okay, so like when I got anything that connected, like, so my family tree, like I said, I should have gotten like a large number of Spanish, and I should have gotten at least a small percentage of the Middle East and whatnot. I got no Spanish. They kicked it all to North Africa, and instead of like a 2% or below Middle Eastern or 1.5% Middle Eastern, they gave me less than 2% Somali, Ethiopia, Eritrea. I was like, oh, word. I was like, okay, this is getting kind of interesting. So they kicked the Spanish into North Africa and the Middle East into East Africa. I was like, oh wow. So it seems like the migration was interesting. Like it went from North Africa to Spain, and from ironically from like East Africa to the Middle East and whatnot. Right now, what's funny about that is, hold on, let me go back one right quick. Let me go back to comparing y'all right quick because I want to show something. Because what's funny about that concept is that when you look at, so you see here where it goes from Morocco. Oh, let me do this. Where's my pointer at? There we go. Like on ESPN and Miss Pews. So we got Moroccan Jews. We go from Moroccan Jew to North African Jew to Yemenite Jew to Ethiopian Jew, which could potentially be a migration pattern from Morocco to North Africa, from Yemen, from Ethiopia. Now, what was interesting about that from Yemen from Ethiopia is like that's what my DNA was looking like in the family tree, where it kicked her Middle Eastern into Ethiopia for me. So when I saw that, I was like, whoa, because I would have thought that to be a little bit different, like Ethiopia to Yemen first, right? Or like so like or Ethiopian Jews being third and Yemen being fourth. But here it said Yemen third and Ethiopian fourth. And so I thought it's like a weird zigzag pattern and whatnot, but it reflects what my DNA looked like in the family tree, where it kicked her North African or her Spain into North Africa, her Middle East into East Africa. So I got East African DNA from my mother, and I didn't get from my father. Now, what's interesting, what's even more interesting about that is like now we're gonna get into my Ethio helix, right? So you're averaging 51 in the Ethio helix. My mom's averaging 59 in the Ethio helix. This is me. Right? So I'm 14% North African. My 12.34, the Eastern Bantu, like that's most likely my Native American DNA right there. And then you see the Khoisan, the West African, the Biaka Pygmy, the French, being my European, etc. And then you see again, I'm 5.64% Omotic, almost exactly, almost same as you. And oh, by the way, I didn't put this picture in, but so you sent me your ancient your Gendrosia ancient razor.
I just shared that for fun. I wish you could show it. That one, that's just for fun. I would tell people to take that with a grain of salt, but man, that one is fun.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to tell you where you got to take it serious with this whole Ethiopian Yemenite, and also like where it talks about the Druze and the Jordanian stuff as well, right? Because it says that you're 34% Natufi.
Precisely, yeah.
And so the Natufians are an ancient population of Canaan that go back 11 to 15,000 years and whatnot, are like the base population for the Middle East and in North Africa and whatnot.
And the one thing I'll say is I don't know how serious to take it, but that was not an oracle result. That's the result like you see it have on the screen where it's with the pie chart. And I do think the results that you get in those pie charts before you go into oracle should be taken a lot more serious than the oracle stuff. That was one of the points that I was coming in with. So maybe it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. The Natufian stuff I just shared because I just thought it was incredibly funny, because I know, let me put it this way. I think other people, if they wind up getting Natufian at that results, they're going to get very excited. I'm not as willing to be as excited as they are, but man, it's funny in that regard. You know
what? Let me just cheat right quick because I did it like this.
Yep, there we go.
Let me just cheat. So my man is 34.47% Natufian. So a lot of my homies who know what the Natufian thing is, their jaws on the floor like, oh, what? They're like, no. They're like, nah, Abu's all kind of Jewish in this piece. All them Jewish things we just saw, no, that's legit, son. And they're gonna ride, to the cows come home. they're riding out after the wheels fall off. But I'm gonna say this, like, so my mother's 29% Natufian.
Again, man, a lot of similarities between me and your mother's side. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm 17% Natufian.
Interesting. Wow.
And so I would.
That's interesting. Now I'm not sure what to make of that. Like, I was honestly.
Well, wait till I say this part here. So there's a Somalian woman who I do comparisons with, who shows to be actually more Ethiopian Jewish than Somalian or whatnot, and she's 30% Natufian.
Interesting.
So you're the most Natufian person I've run into so far. Yeah. So you have genetics. Something ties you to that population in some way, shape, or form of the people who were in the pot. And you know what? Let me
honestly, now that I'm thinking, it is interesting that it's higher than my my East Asian. Like, I don't know what to make.
No, it's significant, fam.
It's difficult for me to wrap my mind around that, because, like I said, I have a grandfather who spoke like Ilocano, a Filipino language, as his first language. So it's like, I don't know.
So can I come through for Lumpy, or what's up, man? Like,
wait, I missed what you said. Say it again.
Can I come through for Lumpy or what, man? What's going on? Can anybody make Lumpia rolls or no?
Say it again. Oh yeah, no, I got you now. No, man, unfortunately, no. Just like I lost the language, I lost the cuisine as well.
Bad, man. I used to have some Filipino homies. Like, man, we used to come like.
Yeah, I know that.
Man.
Yeah, it's amazing cooking.
Man. Yes, sir. Anyway, let me get back to my thing right quick. So yeah, we're breaking hearts right now because so a lot of people wish they were Natufian. I'm gonna tell you that right now. A lot of people wish they were, but so these are my numbers in the Ethio Helix. So I'm 44. Again, you're 51. My mother's 59 on average. I'm on average 44. So in order for me to have a number lower than my mother, that means my father has to have a number lower than me.
Yeah.
So my father is 94% sub-Saharan African. And again, like I said, the Ethio Helix is particularly sensitive when it comes to the Ethiopian Jewish thing and whatnot. But again, my father also has genetics that show an east to west migration as well. Again, you can find people with this haplogroup in Sudan and whatnot. So there's a big east to west migration on both sides of my family, and so yeah. So one thing my genetics shows is that in the Ethio Helix. So Ethio Helix is interesting because a lot of the urban apologists and people like Sister Salama went out. They were saying like we need to use the Ethio Helix to prove out if we're Jewish in any way, shape, or form. And I believe Salam is Ethiopian herself or whatnot.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they were saying not to use the MDLP. She told me because of my mixture I could use the MDLP, and so I did. And I come up Ethiopian Jewish, Moroccan Jewish, Algerian Jewish, Ashkenazi, all in the single populations in the MDLP. I come up Ethiopian Jewish and MDLP, Ethio Helix, and OCAD. And so for me, and again, like I said, I have a DNA test that says that I actually have East African genetics and whatnot that goes back to Ethiopia and whatnot. So when I look at that, I'm like, yo, okay, I look at this different because like I said, not everyone comes. I looked at a lot of people and they didn't come up Ethiopian Jewish or whatnot. So when I find people that do. And now again, the people I'm talking about that didn't come up Ethiopian Jewish didn't come up Ethiopian Jewish in the single population. They came up Ethiopian Jewish in the two populations. But again, we're talking. I tested people from North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, South Africa, East Africa, all in GedMatch and whatnot. And again. So the Somalian sister, she came up Ethiopian Jewish, right? She was the only person in Africa I tested that did in the single population. Like, so I test people from Nigeria, Congo, etc. None of them came up Ethiopian Jewish. So you may want to look into that Natufian thing a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Because
well, the Natufian thing is interesting just because I want to reiterate that people should be obviously when you get those pie charts, right, that's more significant than the Oracle results. I do think from what I've read on the Oracle results, people should be at least the word I'm looking for is careful. Like don't just run and start blowing a trumpet because you got something in your Oracle results but not in your pie chart. You know what I mean? So the Natufian thing, the Omatic thing, the maybe that's hitting it. Like maybe because I have this minuscule amount of East African DNA mixed with something, Arabic. Maybe that's setting off Ethiopian Jew.
Right, but I also say this though. So the concept of you being Natufian and whatnot also plays a role in this, to where like you're getting the Druze and the Jordanians and all that type of stuff. Because again, so you're gonna get the Natufian DNA. You see it in two pockets in the Levant and again Ethiopia, Kenya. So, or Ethiopia, Kenya, Yemen. I'll say it like that.
Interesting.
And so,
interesting.
Right. So I'm seeing all those hit in your joint a little bit. That's why I'd love to see them last five, because I got a hunch them last five have Ethiopian Jew in it.
See, and you know what's funny about this? Like, suppose somebody else got this, right? Like, I don't have any interest in being like in trying to define myself as an Israelite. But suppose there was someone else who was, right, who had the exact same results as me. They might get very excited about this, right? But how excited they should be, this takes us back to the question about how you define Israelite, right? So I have R as my haplogroup, right? And as I said, I'd be if you're gonna make it strictly about paternal lineage, I have serious doubts that R is the haplogroup that goes back to Jacob, right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
But this is all not a somal test right here.
Yeah, but if it's going to just be open-ended, where like anything from Oracle that connects is good enough, which I'm going to be honest with you, I've seen other people basically acting like that. Like, look, I got Ethiopian Jew here, so it's done. The debate is over. If you're going to act like that, I mean, I can hit those results too. But again, it takes us back to this question of definitions, because obviously you can get Ethiopian Jew in your results, but in your Oracle results, but your paternal line might, like me, it's apparently R is apparently, I'm not confident that R goes back to Jacob. I'd be very doubtful, like if someone put a gun to my head and said I had to bet, I'm going with, I'm skeptical about any of them. I'm reluctant to pick any of them. But if someone said, you gotta, like you said, bet your rent money, I would go with J or E1B1B. I'm not betting on R. I'm not dropping my rent money on R.
If I had to bet my rent money on just one of, if you had to pick one, what would it be?
It's going to be hesitantly, very reluctantly, J, and then my second choice.
Just one. You got J.
Well, let me throw an E1B1B with my second choice. But yeah, no, if I had to, I'm going to very reluctantly throw it on J.
All right, so I'm gonna say this, so if I had to put the rent money on just one of them, I would put it on E1B1B.
That's fine.
And I would do so for me, I'm saying that based upon some studies I looked at, but so you have people who are in the lineage of the Cohens that have it, people in the lineage of the Sayeds that have it, or the lineage of the Prophet, and also people who are in the Druze population who have it, who say they descend from Jethro or whatnot. So you would have
the Samaritans, right? The Samaritan Cohens apparently have a lot of E1B1B.
You got it.
Yeah. So, it's funny that neither of us are betting on R, though.
No.
So it takes us back to that whole point about how we take these results ties right back in with how we define Israelite. And therefore, that's why I always try to ask people, when they say, oh, look at this piece of evidence, look at this. The question is, well, how do you define Israelite in order for me to interpret this, Like, so again, like Dante, E1B1B, fine. It seems like the chances are high for him. But someone like me with R, if we're going strictly paternal, all this Ethiopian Jewish stuff is Natufian. It's all like irrelevant, potentially anyway,
Potentially, yeah. But we all come from somewhere, right?
Oh, agreed, of course.
And so that's what's interesting about this concept here is when I look at your DNA and my mom's DNA, I ask the question let's say with you, you're R, okay? You say you don't believe that goes back to Jacob. I agree.
Well, I mean, I think like you said, it's possible. It's possible. I'm just not betting.
It's not probable. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, no, I wouldn't even bet your rent money on it. I ain't gonna lie to
you. You're gonna look out for me, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even bet your rent money on it.
That's funny, man.
But what was like? Yeah, here's so you potentially are autosomally closer than somebody who's actually who could paternally descend from Jacob and have a whole different phenotype.
Exactly. And so that begs the question, which is more important? Is it the paternal line or is it just any line? Yeah. And that these have huge impacts.
Right.
This starts to show how the definition of Israelite that you hold to has huge impacts on how you interpret this DNA. And by the way, the reason why I don't really care about this ultimately is because I hold to what I would call an ecclesiastical definition anyway. So it's like, meh, you know. But yeah, if other people are holding to a strict paternal definition, it's going to be different from someone who's like, well, any line. You know, what I would call a multilineal definition. It has an impact on how we interpret the evidence that's being appealed to.
I will say that this is interesting. Like, so you can see to where, like, so okay, so my mom's 29, almost 30% Natufi, and you're 34%, and you can see to where, like the Druze and the Jordanians, etc., and again the North Africa, because the Natufians were the basal population of North Africa, basically. You know what I'm saying? So, so, and again, in a lot of the Southern Levant, Southern Mediterranean whatnot. So, like, you can see, like, again, like, so when I see stuff like Tuscan, North Italian and whatnot, like, I'm sure, like, if you looked at other projects, like your MDLP stuff like that came up as well. So, like,
yeah, Italian came up, but keep in mind, Italian doesn't come up in those pie charts. And I think that's significant. I think what it's saying, it's not saying that I have Italian DNA. It's saying that my mixture of like European and North African is similar to the Italian samples they have. Those also have European and North African mixtures. And that's significant because if we can admit that me getting Tuscan as low as at a distance as low as 9, you know, doesn't mean I have Italian ancestry, then by the same token, me having Ethiopian Jew at, you know, at 40 likewise doesn't have to mean that I descend from an Ethiopian Jew. You know, it's possible, but it's also, you know, I would reiterate that I wouldn't consider it very likely.
So what's interesting about that, like, so 23andMe said that my uncle had a small percentage of Ashkenazi Jewish and whatnot, and then when we tested out in family tree, it turned out to be Sephardic Jewish, Sephardic Maghrebi, and then when we doubled again, like, so.
So one of these tests.
None of us came up Ashkenazi at all in family tree. None of us came up Ashkenazi at all in my heritage or whatnot. And so, ironically, but when we got put in GedMatch, we all came up Ashkenazi again, right? It was like, oh, interesting. Well, but again, like, so that E1B1B marker, right? That the EM34 that my uncle and my grandfather have or whatnot. And it's also like a subclade of EM123. It's amongst the Ashkenazi at like a 20% clip, 50%, 15 to 20% clip or whatnot. And so I can see to where I'm going to be related to people who have that. You know what I'm saying? And ironically, like, so my mother, like, would descend from like the people who would be considered like the Al-Maseehee and whatnot, right? But however, like, she doesn't have any Sephardic matches at all in GedMatch, but she comes up Moroccan Jewish, again, North African Jewish, Ethiopian, Yemenite, and Ashkenazi and whatnot. Even Romanian at one point, I think.
I was getting that in one of these as well. You know, especially in the two what do you call it, two population guesses. I'm getting and some of those more European ones. I'm getting like, you know, it's funny too because it would be like Romanian and Han Chinese.
I got it. I got Romanian Jewish, but
Romanian and Han Chinese. That one was, and I got that a bunch of times.
I'm tripping because I don't get Sephardic, but I get everywhere the Sephardic people went to. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I never got Sephardic either. Yeah, that's.
But I got everywhere. But Sephardic Jews not too. It's not in too many of the actual spreadsheets or whatnot. So that's one of the reasons for that. But yeah, like I don't get Sephardic, but I get everywhere they went. You know what I'm saying? And so like I can see, like, so with the Romanian Jews, like I think there's like Bulgarians somewhere in there, right? Like, I'm like, there's Sephardic Jews that left Spain and went all kind of places and whatnot, right? They went to Italy, they went to North Africa, they went to West Africa, they went to Bulgaria, they went to Turkey, they went to all that.
Yeah.
So like
all throughout the Turkish Empire,
right? Exactly.
Which could cover Bulgaria and Romania, but you know,
which has extensive Solotreo, by the way. I would just just throwing that one out there. So it's interesting how that one works because sometimes it shows you where you're related to where population is dispersed to. to where like you would have similar genetics to where people left from one place and went to another place or whatnot. GedMatch is very, very interesting. Like, so there's a lot to deal with. It's not an exact science or whatnot, but I will say this. Once you deal with it enough, you can get a good idea in terms of migration patterns and whatnot. And so, boy, I hate to break it to you, you're breaking a lot of hearts right now, man. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who wish they had your joint right now. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of people who's like, they're looking. You got people cussing GedMatch out right now. Like, wait a minute, like Abu's more Ethiopian Jewish than me. What's going on?
Yeah,
what's going on?
Well, yeah, because a lot of people work with this sort of logic of like, he disagreed with me on a linguistic point, and from the way he talks, I know I know he's got to be. He can't be, whatever this particular nationality that I want to assign myself to.
Right.
I know his lineage across millennia based on his what he disagreed with me on and the way he talks.
Let me get back to my joint again. Oh, by the way, so the Somalian woman who's like largely Ethiopian Jewish, and the Ethiopian helix, I think she comes with like 13, 14. Or wait a minute, it's like I want to say like 13 to 17 on average.
Fascinating. A Somali getting Ethiopian stuff is funny. Now, forgive me if this is a weird analogy, but when my mind wandered, I remember I saw this thing on Twitter where a guy in Turkey, he said that he was talking about how he's like a proud Turk and all that. He took his DNA test and he was getting Greek and Armenian. And he said, at first I wanted to kill myself, but then I realized that the DNA tests are run by liars. Of course I'm all Turk, He put that in there. I wanted to kill myself because he got Greek and Armenian. He wasn't getting these pure blood Turk results. I'm sorry. Forgive that segue there.
No, you're good. So so now that we've completely just blown up the whole community on this whole GedMatch thing, because now we're like, this is an interesting segue, right? Because I'm on a Clubhouse a lot talking with the people like Yashub and with the Ngozi talking about DNA and whatnot. And what's interesting, so Yeshub's an Israelite and Ngozi's not, and they both agree on how the DNA works and how phenotype does not matter for haplogroup and whatnot. That you can have a haplogroup have any phenotype and whatnot. And so they're on there getting Africans pissed off because like, no, some of you related to you're related to the Europeans who are E. And they're pissing off the Europeans because like, no, you're related to the Africans who are E. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to they're both making Israeli Jews mad because they're talking about the Tufians being in E being the basal population of the Middle East and the Levant and whatnot. They're like, what are you talking about? No. It's a beef all back and forth and whatnot. But so here's the truth: is you could be phenotypically Mediterranean and have Ethiopian Jewish genetics.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the way you look tells us nothing about. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is no, of course. I have my kids, right? I have a cousin who has, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed daughter, right? And this little girl descends paternally from the same person that that my kids descend from, right? And yet they look so different, right? I'm not going to give any, I would say my daughter looks like somewhat like you based on your picture, right? And then yet she has a second cousin who's blonde hair and blue eyed. They have the same paternal lineage going back to this guy who's Moroccan and Filipino, So yeah, you can get a drastically within 2-3 generations. And I think a lot of people see that in their families, You know what I mean? Like you can look drastically different from a person who's, just a second cousin, Yeah. So yeah, your outward appearance tells us nothing about your lineage, and that's why people should definitely be careful with these attempts to say, oh well, this person's an Israelite and this person's not, based purely on how they look,
right.
And it's very funny when they, for example, I like the example of Lenny Kravitz. There's people who would point to Lenny Kravitz and go, yeah, Israelite, and then they'd point to his father's side Kravitz and go, Edomite. And then you say, well, that's actually his father, and they, oh, okay, well then Lenny Kravitz is an Edomite too, and you're like, well, wait a minute, how did you figure this out? You're saying one person you can't tell their lineage across millennia based on how they look, but the other person you can,
His daughter's a really good example of that. So both her parents, again, so Lenny Kravitz, half African, half Jewish. married a woman, half African, half Jewish. They have a kid, half African, half Jewish, or whatnot. Again, like, so if you were to look, if you take their daughter, put all three of them in a picture, whatnot, like, okay, everyone looks so-called African, right? Phenotypically and whatnot. Like, so, like, it in that situation, your man's got Jewish genetics, etc., whatnot. Like, so is his daughter Jewish? How does that work? Like, what's going on with that? Phenotypically, everyone looks one way, but if you go back just a generation. Just the generation, the family photo looks completely different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but I'm saying all that to say this too. Like, so, with genetics, there's a lot of people talking about, like, were they Portuguese Jews and Spanish Jews black? Were they white? Like, I'm on Israelite channels, I'm on Christian channels saying they were both. You know? Understand something? They were both. They weren't all just one. Like, first of all, I heard people try to make arguments that, like, they came in from Babylon into Spain and stayed black for 1,000 years. Like, I don't understand how. Particularly when you understand the story of Spain and saw how many people ran through Spain. I mean, if they stayed within themselves for 1,000 years, they would have as many, if not more, genetic issues within themselves that the Ashkenazis have.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
I mean, you could there's falsification tests. Like, this is why I love genetics when it comes to this kind of stuff, because there's falsification tests you can really show out in genetics when it comes to populations and whatnot.
And most populations come up very diverse. I mean, what we see with Ashkenazi Jews, we see, I'm going to say mainstream Sephardic Jews. You know, the people that are recognized as Sephardic Jews today. Their DNA is apparently very diverse in terms of paternal lineages, you know, paternal haplogroups and stuff like that. And it's true of so many other groups: Ethiopians, Egyptians. You know, even the Lemba, apparently, you know, I mean,
right.
You know, you get an E and you get an J. That seems to imply now, that's not to say that a single population couldn't bring E and J with it from Ethiopia, but I mean, Yemen, but nonetheless, it shows there's some diversity there, you know?
They have 3 E's amongst the Lemba, by the way. They have E1B1B, they have E1B1A, and they have EM40. I forgot which one that is. But yeah, they got the E1B1B plus the J1, like you were talking about. Pretty much everywhere you see J1, you see E1B1B. Which is how that one works. But yeah, man. So I think we're done breaking hearts or whatnot.
Yeah, and this was a long show. Although the only question is, who's going to catch this? I guess we have to.
I'm going to break this up in parts or whatnot.
Yeah, because it's like 4 hours long.
Oh, I'm definitely going to break this one up. But I think people. This part here, like this last part, I think is going to be really intriguing for people, because
it might be a talking point, huh? Yeah.
There's going to be talking points on both sides, because so you're more Ethiopian Jewish in the Ethio Helix than the vast majority of the Israelites in the community, right? Yet I'm more Ethiopian Jewish in that project than you are.
Yes, correct. Yep.
So
we're more likely to be. Let's put it that way.
You know, I'm just saying what the project says, right? I'm not saying
yes.
What
your probability is higher than
right.
mine. Your distance are lower, so your probability is higher. Yeah.
Right. So there's narratives on both sides of that gotta get walked out.
So it brings back all these methodological questions, like how do we interpret oracle results? You know.
Exactly, 100%. But so and with the oracle results and with anything genetic, you got to prove out with historical migrations anyway. So this is where it gets interesting. This is why I like getting into Dante's DNA, because like what you recognized, him being E1B1B is significant in showing that migration pattern.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there. Yes. Yeah.
So I look forward to that conversation, and again, I really look forward to slowing this thing down. I'm gonna try to like hit the brakes on this as much as possible, so people don't talk past each other, but also miss the information that's there, because
and there's a lot of emotion and anger that gets into a lot of that also. Because I mean, something that I've experienced is you know what's interesting is I feel like you might be the only person who's caught this. You know, I've literally never asked a person to prove that they're an Israelite, because I believe it's impossible. That's why I don't do that. I know other people do that, but I think it's impossible. So it's unfair to ask someone to try and prove it, right? And I've never told a person that they're not. I would never do that. Like, I've never claimed I know a person's lineage across millennia, right? But for some reason, there's so many people who will first, they'll accuse me of doing that. You're out here challenging us to prove that we're Israelites. I'm like, never done that. And then they'll tell me I'm a liar when I say that I've never done it. Like, I've seen you do it, Why would you waste all this time on the pews unless you're trying to, backhanded, it's like, so yeah, a lot of emotion and a lot of anger. Like at a certain point, I think it becomes blinding,
Right. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one for people to sift through because, like, so I think there's one argument on one side where, like, someone's gonna be like, "Oh man, does this mean I'm not Ethiopian Jewish if Abu is more Ethiopian Jewish than me?" Or
yeah,
people were like, "Oh man, I'm Moroccan Jewish in my thing. That's fantastic." Wait a minute, Abu is he more Moroccan Jewish than me?
Or more likely to be, yeah. Well, what I would say is I would reiterate that's coming up on my Oracle results, and me personally, people can disagree with me. Me personally, I think people need to be careful of getting too excited about their Oracle results because Oracle is something different from that area in GedMatch with the pie charts, right? And I'm not saying that it's false because what it's doing is it's like I said, that's why I give the analogy of modal logic. It's discussing possibilities and probabilities. It's a bit more perhaps speculative is the way to describe it, it's like I personally don't think any of this leads to the conclusion that I'm an Israelite, but if some of the people who are celebrating their Oracle results as definitive proof, right? It seems that I'm in a position to play a similar game. But I don't think it's, you know what I mean? So it brings up this methodological question again. Like, how should we go about interpreting Oracle results? And I feel like the funny thing is I feel like we've only scratched the surface of that question, of definitions,
right,
methodologies,
Right. And so this is where I was talking about migration patterns. So it helps to know a little bit of your own history, but it really helps to know migration patterns and whatnot. So that you're partially Moroccan and whatnot. And so And this is what makes it interesting about it because like I think this actually slows the conversation down. Like your genetics and my genetics actually slows this conversation down quite a bit about the thing about DNA period because between the two of us there's different phenotypes between our families. There's different and similar phenotypes and whatnot, different and similar genetics and whatnot, and different and similar belief systems. Like so it's it's a trip, but. So again, on the one side, people could throw it out like, oh no, Abu's not Jewish at all, whatever. But like on the other side, you actually got to look at it because you do have a Moroccan lineage and whatnot. So understanding the history of Morocco, you can't rule it out. And then that concept, you can't rule out the two migrations, one from the Levant and then also one from Ethiopia, Yemen, where there could be mixes from, right? But on the other hand, you can't just automatically say, well, that's what it is. Like so, okay.
Yeah. Like it's been definitively proven.
Right. There's plausibilities on all sides, and that's what I like about what's going on with this story. Like when you showed me your DNA, I was like, word. I was like, I wonder if Abu knows what this is or what this looks like because I was like, I'm used to this. I'm like, this looks just like my mom.
It was very new to me. I had just started when I sent it to you that morning. It was because it was. I'm gonna be honest with you. It wasn't exciting to me because I think, oh man, look what I got. I'm so excited, for myself. I was excited. Now maybe this is unfair, but I was excited because I thought it sheds light on how careful people need to be about Oracle. I don't think it says anything like I don't think it was like, oh, Abu's an Israelite. No, I think it's people need to be careful with their Oracle results is the lesson I was, and that's why I was excited.
Right. Yeah, Oracle's not perfect.
People missed.
Yeah, Oracle's not perfect, and the way they put the products together aren't perfect. Like there's definitely there's definite issues with that for sure. But I will say this: once you get
thing is interesting, though. I am gonna have to rethink that. Like, I'm skeptical.
Yeah, man.
I'm skeptical about that Oracle stuff, but yeah, the pie charts. Yeah, it's like.
Oh man, there's people ready to fight on both sides. You don't even know right now, man. Tomorrow's about to go down. It's about to go down on Clubhouse tomorrow, man.
Yeah, see, I'm not on Clubhouse. Let me. I got to look through my wife's account to see. Yeah.
Oh, don't get your wife caught up on that one, bro, because it's about to go down. It's going in a very bad way. I'm talking about there's gonna be all kind of fights and people getting cussed out tomorrow. But it'll calm
let
down
me know
after
what happens, what conversations happen. I know you can't report, so you'll have to do like just a recounting. But
yeah,
please do share that with me.
Yeah. Oh, this one. Yeah. I think between this and then going over Dante's DNA, there's going to be a lot.
Yeah, Dante's DNA is very interesting. At least his haplogroup, his paternal haplogroup is very interesting. Yes, and I'll grant that to him.
I do believe he has a significant like a Southeast African.
It's believable though with that haplogroup. It's believable. It seems to I mean, it's it's very believable. Like I would assume it. I would assume it. Like if you
So that was good. Yeah. So I'm assuming after we talk about his DNA on his channel, that it's gonna go. There's gonna be a lot of good scraps going on in terms of getting this methodology right, because we're gonna have to with this juncture because again, like, we're slowing things down and putting things on the table that got to be examined. Like, so even you're saying you came in thinking that it was gonna prove one thing, but like, wait a minute, like, even hear me talk, you had to rethink a couple things. Like,
because the fact that I got Ethiopian Jewish, that was the assumption that I got was, man, that has to be anyone who has any recent connection to Africa is going to get it, So I got some Moroccan, family, blah, blah, blah. And so that's it. But no, you, like I said, you answered the question before I asked it. It was like, I'm asking the question silent in my mind. I'm like putting the bullet in the chamber and you already, then you answered. I was like, oh, okay.
So I'm coming over for some lumpia rolls and some injera right quick.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's not Oracle. That's legit. The Filipino heritage is for real. I might have to order it from a restaurant, but nonetheless, the Filipino heritage is legit.
Oh, that's right.
This is also, but the thing is, man, like you saw, you got Puerto Rican in one of these. I got that. I don't remember which one it was, but Puerto Rican came up also in Oracle, emphasis on Oracle, but it got me thinking, because something that's been it also shows that people have to be careful with, like, connecting an Oracle result with something that you heard, right? Like, for example, my father's brother went out to LA, right? And he got murdered out there in the 80s, right? In the early 80s. And he had a son, apparently. Now, I haven't met this guy yet. I've only heard about him. I'm trying to get in contact with him, right? He had a son who never met him, right? And apparently this guy, he's a guy like us in his 40s. This guy is out there believing that that his father was Mexican, that my father's brother was Mexican, because that's what his mother told him. She assumed that this man she had a child with was Mexican, right? And like, that got me thinking, on my side, there's a lot of people who are close friends of my father. Like, I tried to imagine myself, I grew up with my father. I know people from where I grew up in the Lower East Side, right? When I was growing up, there was a very Puerto Rican neighborhood. There are people that sincerely believed my father was Puerto Rican, right? If I had been in that guy's situation where, let's say, I never knew my father and I went back to his neighborhood and asked people, there would be people who would sincerely tell me my father was Puerto Rican. And then imagine I jump on GedMatch and see Puerto Rican. Like, there's a temptation to run with that,
Right.
So there is, again, this whole thing about, like, be careful with your Oracle results, and especially, I don't know. I know that was a weird segue, but that's just that it ties into something I've been thinking about.
No, it's very true. But then, and this is what I'm saying. Like, you gotta, like, if you gotta really play with GedMatch for a long time to really understand how to read it and whatnot. And you need to know you gotta almost get consumed with it. It's crazy. But there's certain situations to where, like, it can actually be really helpful in terms of the Oracle. Like, so for instance, whenever I put my stuff in like an African only, the first one that comes up is Fulani. Now, literally every DNA test I've ever taken suggested I was Fulani.
Okay.
But at the same point in time, my father's haplogroup is very rare amongst Africans and whatnot, in the sense for, like, there's not a whole bunch of different groups that have it. One of the major ones that have it are the Fulani. So it's Fulani, Dogon, Hausa, in West Africa that have it. There's a few others that have it, but like it's like negligible, like 1% of the population have it. You know what I'm saying? So also knowing my father's migration pattern in the Americas, and like knowing that he's from Alabama, but his people came from Georgia, in the Low Country and whatnot. So there was a lot of Fulani that were there, like I keep pointing out in Arabic stuff and whatnot. So not only that, like my grandfather looks like the Fulani that were in that area and whatnot. Like, so for me, I can see where there's a significance to where I can see where it works out for me, but it's for me it's different. Like, so I have a rare haplogroup. I know my admixtures between my mother and my father. Like, so again, I know my mother and father are phenotypically different, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know my father is 94% sub-Saharan African. I know my mother's mixed with, right? Like, so it's easy for me. It's easier for someone like me to differentiate in GedMatch and negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
If you are someone who is like 90 some odd percent sub-Saharan African or etc., it's going to be tougher. Or both of your parents are the same thing. It's going to be tougher because everything looks similar. And it's hard to tell the difference between this, that, and the third, and what's going on. For me, it's easy to tell what the migrations are, who's coming from where, etc., etc., etc.
But by the way, regarding your mother, you said her father has E1B1B as well, right?
Yep.
What's interesting about that is, like, I'm guessing you've caught some of these polemics that exist online now, where so you have the One Westers with their tribes chart, right? Where it's the West African diaspora, the Native Americans, Latinos, and stuff like that. They're all Israelites, right? And on a certain level, right, that's hard to take seriously, right? But then you have some people, these Israelites, who they swing because they're swinging away from the 12 tribes chart of One West. They swing into this situation where they say, well, they'll say these sweeping statements like Hispanics are not Israelites, right? And so, like, the people who think like that, who say, who are just going to wave their hand and say, these European and Mongolian looking people, they're not Israelites. I imagine that a person with that mindset might look at your mother and wave her off. And yet she descends apparently from someone who has E1B1B. Interesting, interesting. So meaning like there's
African genetics at that.
Yeah, it's a more decent probability. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I think if someone with E1B1B, I assume East Africa. That's like
right, East Africa, Arabia, exactly, 100%. Yeah,
and so I would say, like, based on what we were saying earlier, like, if you had to bet, it's E1B1B is going to be high amongst where our bets are going to go, in terms of a paternal haplogroup, So it ties back in with this thing of, like, trying to wave people off based on how they look is foolhardy, So, well, let's put it this way. Let's see. Let's take, there are lots of people within the West African diaspora who do not have any form of E as their haplogroup, right? They might be R, they might be G, right? Here's an interesting thing. Your mother, Dante Fortson, and Albert Einstein are more closely related paternally to each other than they are to, say, a member of the West African diaspora who has a haplogroup other than E,
Right.
And that's significant because that shows right there that trying to guess, like, paternal lineage or any line of lineage based across millennia based on how someone looks it's a fool's errand, to be blunt.
And I'm gonna keep it real. As far as I'm concerned, I think that's what the Most High was trying to do with. I think that one of the major reasons that the Most High spread out the Israelites around the world was so that when they came back, they would look like the whole world.
I heard you say that on Dante. I thought that was a really interesting point. Yeah, spread amongst all nations. Yeah, and therefore, so they come back looking like everybody.
That way, when they come back saying the same thing, like everyone's got to listen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's less hostility. We're like, okay. I don't like those guys over there, but you on the other hand, I'll listen to you.
I think it's the best free commercial in the game, right there. You know what I'm saying? having the nation look like everybody when it's all said and done. That's just me.
And it takes us back to this point about definitions, though, because let's say I know this isn't your definition, but if only paternal lineage matters, then a person who descends paternally from Jacob could look like anyone. There's nothing ruling that out, you know?
Yeah, and like I said, you could be a 7-foot albino Mongolian, fam.
Exactly. Yeah. They could look like anything. All right. On that note, I hope you forgive me if I'm starting to, because I got to get up.
No, man, I got to tap out.
Yeah, I got to get up in like 3 hours to go to church. So, I got to get this. I'm going to desperately need these 3 hours here.
I know that's right. Well, I appreciate you for your time. I appreciate you for your methodology. I appreciate you for your forthrightness. And I appreciate your questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I hope this sparks further conversation. My honest assessment is that we're still just scratching the surface of these questions, you know?
Oh, yeah. And I think when it comes to the Pews, when it comes to DNA, I think we really just hit the brakes on a lot of this stuff. Because there's like when you're asking the question now, like, what does it mean to be an Israelite? Like, yo, this question's really got to get answered at this juncture. But I'll also say this, like, I don't think everyone has to answer the question.
Of course.
People who don't want to engage, because there's people who don't want to engage, like the urban apologist or Christian apologist or whatnot, and they don't have to, because there's some apologists out there who've kind of soured the whole thing for everybody.
Agreed. And even without that, I would certainly agree that nobody's obligated to answer. Right. Nobody is obligated to answer any question I ask. But I do think the question is important, even if people don't want to discuss it with me.
Right. And that's right. And that's definitely one thing that I think is important, is that when someone asks a really good question, even if they got bad intentions, I'll say it like this: even if they got bad intentions, you got to answer it in the court of public opinion, because it needs to get answered, because otherwise it looks bad if it doesn't get answered. But
not only that, focus on the argument. There's a weird thing. There's a weird thing that's going on where people have this weird sense of trust, right, with regards to these conversations. Like, I'll give you 3 examples, right? I've had a number of people who say to me, like, when I try to discuss language with them, they say to me, "Oh, you think I'm going to trust you? I would never trust you." And then I have to explain, I'm not asking you to trust me on anything. Let's just look at the arguments. And then the flip side of that is, before I went on Berean in November of last year, there were people who literally told me, "Don't trust Berean, he's going to set you up." And before I went on your show in February, people told me the same thing: "Don't trust Moor, he's going to set you up." And I had to explain to people, the worst thing that can happen is I'm either disproven on a point. Let's say you prove the point that I've taken publicly wrong, or you hit me with an argument that I have no answer to, and I have to say, I have to look into that. I don't know the answer. That's, for me, I'm at peace with both of those outcomes. So it's like, it's not a worry. But there's a number of people out there that there's this weird thing about, I don't trust this person. Don't give this person anything, because there's all this sinister assumptions on both sides. I don't trust you. Don't trust this person. And it's like, let's just focus on the arguments. It doesn't, but I think it also comes into this whole thing about our brand, people are really worried about, on both sides, not everybody. There are certain people on both sides who are really worried about protecting their brand. And for me, that's don't worry about that. We just focus on the arguments, there's no way. And if anything, we benefit from these conversations, even if, let's say, I show up on a show and I get proven wrong. Let's say I take a position, you knock it down. It's like, okay, because I'm not worried about a brand. I'm not worried this is a presidential debate. Now I can never be president because you proved me wrong with something.
At the end of the day, I don't care if you're right or wrong. I care if you argue in good faith or not.
Yeah, and I think that's important as well.
Biggest issue. That's my biggest issue. And so I don't deal with intentions, because I can't tell people's hearts, but I definitely make a decision on if you're arguing in good faith or not, real quick. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with so, okay, if I give you something, I'll ask you, so what's your threshold on something? I got to find out what you're lying on something. So what will you accept? What won't you accept, or whatnot? And so you'll let me know what your bias is at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's unacceptable, if I can't bring you realistic information and have you accepted, I can't deal with you. You know what I'm saying? Or at least not in a good faith situation. But with that, family, we are now running up on 5 hours exactly.
Yeah, let me run. Thank you for the conversation.
Yes, sir. Peace and blessings upon all you. Appreciate you for your time. I hope you have a good time at church. Thank you, Sal, for giving us the platform. Peace and blessings. God bless. All that. Here is a tune to go to sleep on, fam.
Bye.